Okay, hi again. I'm going to do a short presentation on the history of the Homelands movement, and then we've got members of the AHNT board who are actually Homelands residents who are going to give you a bit of an indication in the life of a Homelands resident and the advantages and disadvantages of being a Homeland resident, particularly in this era of uncertainty in funding. So I'm just going to give a quick present overview of the history of Homelands, and then we'll refer to our deadly panel up here to give you an indication for those of you who don't know what it's like in a Homelands environment. The Homelands movement emerged in the 1970s as a response to forced displacement policies. The Homelands movement emerged in the early 1970s, driven by Aboriginal people's determination to return and live sustainably on country. Following decades of forced displacement, under assimilation policies from the 1930s onwards, the introductions of the self-determination policy by the Whitlam government in 1972 marked a significant turning point. Gough did a lot for us. And then they sacked him, M1. Early support through Australian grants and the enactment of the Aboriginal Land Rights Act of 1976 facilitated the return of self-governance of Aboriginal communities on country, further supported by the Community Development Employment Program, CDP, which was established in 1977. During the 80s, significant government support drove growth in homelands, communities and infrastructure. During this period, the Homelands movement significantly expanded growth from approximately 165 homelands with around 4,200 residents in 1981 to between 400 and 500 communities, housing about 10,000 residents by 1985. So I don't know that we've done a proper count since 1985, but I would say that there are a lot more than 10,000 people now living on homelands. The Australian government maintained overall responsibility, providing new infrastructure and essential services as outlined in the 1978 Memorandum of Understanding with the NT government. The influential 1987 Return to Country report, also known as the Blanchard report, recommended continued funding, better service delivery, infrastructure and education support, significantly shaping Homelands policies and practices. This was then bolstered by the National Aboriginal Health Strategy, the NARS, commencing in 1989, which included a priority for Aboriginal housing and essential services, including in homelands. So the creation of AHNT helped to formalise funding and governance structures for homelands. In 1990, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, AHNT, was established, taking a lead role in homelands through the Community Housing and Infrastructure Program, CHIP, it used to be called, and CDEP. In 1995, the Indigenous Housing Authority of the Northern Territory, AHNT, was established as a partnership between AHNT and the Northern Territory Government for the management and construction of housing and infrastructure in both homelands and communities. The abolition of AHNT in 2005 drastically altered the landscape, including the dissolution of Indigenous Housing Northern Territory AHNT. This was followed by the Australian government imposed moratorium in 2006 that halted funding for new homelands housing, as this resulted in significant infrastructure deterioration. Following the dissolution of AHNT in 2005, funding reductions have led to deterioration in homelands infrastructure. From 2006, the Australian government placed a halt on new homelands housing, resulting in severe infrastructure and widespread deterioration of those properties. In 2007, we all know what happened in 2007, don't we? Yeah. But also in 2007, responsibility for municipal and essential services was transferred to the Northern Territory Government. With limited funding from the Australian government, $20 million per year for 4 years, but there was no funding for new houses on homelands. By 2008, Community Housing Infrastructure Program had ended, and reforms phasing out CDP significantly impacted local employment and economic stability. From 2012 onwards, policy shifts saw substantial commitments, $221 million Australian and NT government's investment over 10 years for essential services on homelands. In 2015, the following Australian government's decision to cease municipal services and funding nationally, the NT government assumed full responsibility, receiving a one-off sum of $155 million from the Australian government and establishing a shared responsibility homelands policy. Since then, the quality of housing stock and infrastructure on homelands has worsened. Although there has been limited policy movement and progress since 2015, recent years have seen new investment in remote housing, most notably the Australian NT governments, the 4 land councils and Aboriginal Housing NT, signed a partnership agreement for remote housing and homelands, announcing a $4 billion joint investment between the 2 tiers of government for housing in remote communities over 10 years. So we're 2 years into that 10-year agreement now. Under this agreement, a further investment of $40 million per year for 3 years, equaling $120 million, to continue urgent upgrades across NT homelands through the Homelands Housing and Infrastructure Program. So the current state of homeland sector, there are 37 homeland service providers who vary significantly in size and scope. Homeland service delivery is facilitated through partnerships between government agencies and service providers. These organisations are contracted to deliver a range of services to homeland communities, including municipal and essential services and housing maintenance services. The Northern Territory Government provides funding for the delivery of these services through a network of 37 homeland service providers, and these include Aboriginal community-controlled homeland services providers or outstation resource centres, regional local government councils, Aboriginal business enterprises and private contractors. Providers vary significantly in size and scope, as I've said, from large organisations servicing over 30 homelands to smaller operators working with just a few locations. We've got a service provider in the room that looks after 60 homelands, and that distance can vary sparsely. Homeland service providers deliver vital and essential services on behalf of the government across some of the most remote parts of Australia, ensuring coverage across the majority of the Northern Territory. The sector includes a strong representation of Aboriginal community control organisations, many of which have deep roots and connections in communities in which they operate. These organisations are grounded in local knowledge and histories. Many have residents on their boards and committees, providing a clear and direct homelands voice in governance. Delivering services is challenging. You heard Tom speak before. It's hard work. And it's hard work for AHNT. I can only imagine how hard it is for service providers out there in remote communities trying to provide services in a time-efficient manner. The remoteness makes it worse. So these remote service providers operate with limited funding in a difficult and unclear policy landscape where responsibility for homelands is contested between 2 tiers of government. The high cost of delivering services in very remote locations is compounded by the difficulty in achieving economies of scale. So you might have a block toilet out there in the homelands. Takes a while to get a plumber to go out there and have a look. They come back, toilet's blocked again next day. Where's the accountability? Recruiting and retaining staff in remote communities remains a significant barrier in the midst of a national labour shortage. Some organisations experience shortfalls in governance, administration and financial management capacity, which can make meeting the compliance requirements of funding agreements very difficult. The cost of purchasing materials has also significantly increased post-COVID-19, and now we have the war with the fuel costs and the food costs out there, food security. So this is putting increased pressure on homeland service providers and residents and their expenditure. At the same time, infrastructure in many homelands is ageing, with housing and services often stretched to capacity or falling below standard. Addressing these issues will be essential to ensure long-term sustainability of services and the well-being of homelands residents. Land councils also have an important role in the homelands movement through their administration of land trusts. Homelands are on traditional land held by land trusts, which are statutory bodies established under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act of 1976. These land trusts hold inalienable freehold title on behalf of traditional owners, in accordance with the directions of the relevant land councils. There are 4 land councils in the Northern Territory, for those of you who are not from here: the Northern Land Council, the Central Land Council, Anandiliaka Land Council, which is over on Groote Island, and Tiwi Land Council. These councils are responsible for any lease granted reflecting the wishes of the traditional owners and other affected people. Under Section 19 of the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, a land trust may grant an estate or interest in land to an Aboriginal individual or corporation, but only with the approval of the relevant land council. The approval process requires the land council to confirm that traditional owners have given their informed consent. This involves consultation with affected Aboriginal communities to ensure their views are properly understood and respected. Just a bit about the funding overview. After taking back full fiscal responsibility for Homelands in 2016 to 17, the Northern Territory Government allocated $53.6 million to the core Homelands program for repairs and maintenance, municipal and essential services, and capital improvements. In 2022 to 2023, the Northern Territory allocated $38.6 million, a 28% gross reduction since 2016 in funding, and an even larger reduction of 38% when adjusted for inflation. So a reduction of 38% in the Homelands programs. Additionally, the Northern Territory Government's own Homelands infrastructure audit executive summary provided to the Joint Steering Committee for Remote Housing estimates the cost to upgrade housing and essential infrastructure, power, water and sewage to be conservatively around $1.1 billion. Imposed increased regulation and expectation on the Aboriginal controlled homeland service providers and the sector to continue to do more with less would continue to put increased pressure on an already constrained sector. The 3 programs that are funded for Homelands, they're predominantly funded through a combination of 3 programs, all of which use grants as the funding delivery mechanism. We all know about grant applications as well, and the process in applying for grants. And not all of us can afford to employ consultants that can come in and whip up a grant application. So they have the the housing. Sorry, God, I need to have a feed or I need to have something. The 3 programs are Homelands Housing and Infrastructure Program, the Northern Territory Government Homelands Program for Housing Maintenance Services and Municipal and Essential Services, and the Northern Territory Homelands Capital Program. At the moment, Tom, we're still mates, all right? We still collaborate. At the moment, service providers are being offered 12-month contracts. 12-month contracts to provide services to Homelands across the Northern Territory. So what can people do in 12 months? It gives no stability to people who are employed on the program. It gives no stability to residents. And what's going to happen after 12 months? If the funding does not continue, and we always have to hold our breath to the last minute to find out if we're going to be funded, but if the funding doesn't continue, where are 10,000 plus people going to live? So, people want to live on their country and they want to be away from antisocial behaviour and all of the other issues that go on in communities and urban regional centres or urban environments. People want to be at Homelands because it's cultural maintenance, so that you bring the young kids back to Homelands and reconnect them with their culture and law. And we would see a lot less kids incarcerated, particularly 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds. That was a cough for the people at the back there. Anyway, and the other thing that I have mentioned before, because my mouth always gets me into a lot of trouble sometimes, is Who took people off their homelands in the first place? The government. So people want to go back to homelands, there is a responsibility and a requirement that they should be assisted to do so. Anyway, that's enough of me raving on. I think you got the gist. I'm going to introduce you to our deadly panel now. Mr. Donald Ganambar. Did I say that right? Oh, Galawinku. So Galawinku in the homelands from that region. Annie Roberts from Borroloola. Joyce Jones from Utopia. And Yanamul from Lanapoi homelands. So very well-known areas, lots of homelands, yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask these panel members a couple of questions, just to give you an indication for those of you who don't live on homelands or have never been to a homeland, an idea of what it's like in the day of a homelands resident. Who wants to go first?
Me, so I can get off.
You want to go first? You know, they say talk first and you can get off. Okay, Annie, can you tell our conference attendees here what it is like in a day, in the day-to-day living on a homelands? So the advantages and the disadvantages.
Yeah.
And you've got a microphone there too.
So I'm sure everybody can hear me.
Nothing. Oh, yes, yes.
So the advantages of living on a homeland is I've actually homeschooled my kids, 4 of my kids, and 4 of my grandchildren. So the advantage of that is they didn't have to attend school in town where they're bullied and teased, and they're in a classroom where they feel comfortable. The disadvantage would be now, like back in the day, like because I grew up in a remote area, and I'm used to living in the bush.
Yep.
So there's no difficulty for me and my kids and my husband. But now the way they've moved forward and put infrastructure on homelands, and the slowness and in fixing stuff, now I have to climb a ladder to fill my generator because we've been flooded now with 4 times within 10 years because of climate change. Funding is drying up. We can't get anything fixed like straight away. But before that, I reckon I felt more comfortable with no power, no anything, because that's how I am. But I don't know if somebody would want to come and live with me and try a weekend on Bone Lagoon. But the advantages is growing your kids up on country, teaching them culture, everything to do. Like COVID, everybody was stuck in their houses. Where us mob on homelands, we were out and about, and our kids. Well, I taught my grandkids at home.
Very good.
Oh, the fuel costs. I started work, and the fuel costs every day. I go to town every day for work. I start at 8, finish at 4. I work at the art centre and the radio, but I'm lucky because of my workplace. They provide me with fuel, but that's now because of the fuel costs.
Right.
But besides that, I wouldn't change anything. I'd live there, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, I don't know about these, but they must be more difficult than Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to difference.
All right, you go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Have you turned and take off, I suppose? Yeah. I absolutely am. No, but she's going to still answer questions from down there, but you don't know. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Ganambar, Galawinku, Homelands Living, please.
Hello. I grew up living in a homeland, but when we started moving to the community, it's really difficult for our young people to live within the community with 15 or 16 clans. And that's when we get to have a fight for our life, to live in the community instead of going back to our homelands. and to live in Homelands, because we've got school, we've got health, and even we get service from Mardakal Resource Center. We've got some guys here from Homeland Resource Center that helps us bring fuel, even like right now, like I sit with ALPA, I'm a deputy chair of ALPA, and ALPA's, we are taking our service out to the community to help people to apply for their Centrelink payment, to lodge their form every fortnight. I sometimes apply with my staff out to the community. And the important thing, we need some houses to be built in the homeland so we can bring our kids back to the homeland, because that's where our songlines, it's the nature. You get up in the morning, it's free out in the homeland. So that's my worry. And I'll give you one story. This one's gonna be a bit sad, but I can live with it. Last 2 months ago, I had a birth of my grandson in Darwin Royal Hospital. And my grandson was with his dad, mom for 2 days. And the next day when they went out to have cigarette, my grandson was gone, just like that. They took him. And after that, they took my son and my son's mother through court case. And they've been in prison. They just got out last week while my wife died. That's when they took my grandson to take a look at her grandmother. It's a bit sad, but Yolngu people, we live like that. Within the community, it's really hard for us. By having a house, it would be more better. But don't give us house in the community. Give us house to the homelands so we can move back to our homelands. Thank you.
Joyce Jones from Utopia.
Hi.
Joyce, do you want me to tell you ask you the question again? Well, you're right. Just tell us about how, but it's
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Yeah, I want to say something about where I come from. Elders was living in one area, cattle staging. And after that, there was keep asking how do we get house and clinics for our people. And then they asked among themselves, can we go back to our homelands in 1985. I was grown up there in a cattle station, and then they stood up and asked the government to come to talk to our elders about the housing, but they said we can't say yes to somebody else's land. We don't want missions. Our communities, that's what they said. We want to get our own lands where our grandfathers comes from, so we can teach our younger ones, generations, how to survive and to know bush tucker and bush lands and bush medicine. That's the only way to know, if they forgot, there was nobody, somebody else, if they left. But lucky, finally they got Homelands on that times. 16 Homelands and one service center called El Paro. Utopia is just a suburb. And Irabanja is song lines respectfully sharing the funding, the way the fundings go to, and closing the gap. They're talking about closing the gap. That's the only way, to keep our people to be stand up, because we all born with the culture acknowledgement. We, share our, generations. That's what they said, if somebody else come to our homelands, there'll be someone get ratio, like minings or something else, that's what they said. They was happy on that time, and after that, government was keep changing it, and they was asking each other, how do we, we born with culture and acknowledgement, why they changing it in somewhere in Canberra or somewhere else, and that's what, elders was concerned about it, We're not a racist, we concerned about our artifacts and our lands so we can keep our generations stronger and survive, to know. And, if they move to urban area or city, they'll forget for their land and culture, acknowledgement, and spirits, They break apart of our spirits, if they put a minings, how elders, they're not racist. They just wanted to work together and fundings, that's what they wanted to see, contract and everything, to coming back. They're happy in the homelands, They don't want to learn for drugs or grogs, or, they wanted to keep their generations, to work together for bush medicine and bush tucker and bush lands, That's only way. And there was concerns about, we were struggle and suffered more, and our elders has passed away, some of our people, and even young ones, and that's why they left, because independence came and took away our rights, and some of our families moved into Alice Spring and everywhere scattered, and because no houses and no resources, Yeah, that's all I can say it, and thank you.
Before you go, I'll tell you, I'll just say this one thing and I'll remind you. Utopia, who put Aboriginal art onto the international arena, and we've got board members living in horrendous conditions out there in Utopia. So we're very proud of our board, a lot of lived experience, a lot of knowledge, and not afraid to stand up and tell us that too. Yeah. Okay, the question is, what was the question, you Mob? The question was a day in the life of your Homelands residents, and some of the advantages and the disadvantages of, resource-wise, or, some people have one ablution block in a Homelands, one tap outside for everybody to use. So, yeah.
Well. Good day, everyone. Namiri Bukmak. Yanin Mulmunugur from the land of the Homelands. I travel in and out from my homeland community. I live out at Carlton, homeland, on my mother's country. I'll just give you a bit of information of where I come from. We're a tight-knit community, family. My family lives out there. We have a school, we have a boarding school, we have a local school. Sorry, we host a boarding school. We have a local school, we have a store, a clinic, and all the little things we need for Homelands, for my homeland. The most beautiful thing about living in a homeland is you're at peace, right? You're at peace. For people like me, I travel in and out, and when I go back home, I find myself at peace, because you're surrounded by nature. We run the coast. You have the sea, and you also, you got the sea and the land. And, when I go back home, I'll be going back home to a beautiful place where I can feel the sea breeze, the water, the wind blowing against my skin, that brings me at peace from all the work I do, right? And it's also, going back to my family, my grandchildren, my children. I have two boys, and my eldest one still living under my roof. Yeah, he's got his own family, but I'm still surrounded with my family, my sister, my nephew, and my youngest little boy going to school there. And then I have my nieces and my nephews and all the family. So we're a close-knit family, and that's the most beautiful thing about living in a homeland. That's it's important to be around. As a younger person, it's important to be around your family because of the kinship system, the guruttu system, and the kids going to school, learning on country. That's very, very important for my children, my grandchildren, because we have a school out there, and many of the other homelands in our region, we have schools, and all the kids go to school there as well, in their own little homelands across the Leeanne region. That is, it's always good, important for our children to live on country, to learn on country, to go to school on country. So when they're growing up, that's one of the things that we teach them, the story of the land and the sea and the knowledge of the country, right? Because that's very, very important. There are many other advantages when it comes to living in a homeland, but I'm cautious of the time, but I'd like to talk about the disadvantages. There's no housing, no new builds. Going back to 2006, when the government, said no new builds for homelands. Since 2006, nearly 20 years, I've been lobbying with governments, with bureaucrats, with, agencies, trying to seek, funding, what funding is available for new bills when it comes to people, my people living on country. Right? 20 years. And over the 20 years, I've had 2 grandchildren born into the family. My youngest one, he's 15 years old now. And I've been talking about this, before my youngest son was born. For 20 years, my family, extended family, kids born into my family is growing. There's still no new bills in the homelands, in our homelands. Yeah? And it's, it's safe where we come from. We can control what happens in our community. Right? But when it comes to the bigger communities, you don't control, all the social problems happening in the bigger communities. But in the homelands, and where I come from, my family works together when there are problems at my homeland. We work together to solve, any issues, situations in the community. So, overcrowding is something that, affects our everyday lives. In my household alone, there's me, my sister's partner, her son, me and my youngest son, my 2 grandchildren, my son, and my daughter-in-law, and my other grandson, in just one house. And what little money we get from the government, anti-government, and just recently, I would like to, say thank you to NTG for giving us that little rupiah, little funding to do repairs and maintenance at our homeland. But that's not enough for all the other homelands as well. Other homelands, they miss out big time. Right? And looking into the future, our numbers, I believe our numbers in the homelands alone, in our homelands alone, have increased over the years. I can't recall when the last ABS count happened. That count was there was a bit of mixture when they did the census. Because during that time when they did the census, there was a lot of our people from our homelands. They went to another homeland for a big ceremony, for a big funeral ceremony, and everybody was counted at that homeland community, which was funny. And they got missed out when it came to their particular homelands, because the counting of the numbers was confusing, because people was traveling a lot for funerals. Yeah? And these sort of things we need to consider very carefully of where people come and go. Yeah? And that's that's one of the factors when it comes to the census, the ABS account alone. People get missed out where they are residing at, where they live at. And our roads is another thing. For the roads and airstrips alone, we have to, knock on everybody's door to find funding to fix our roads and our airstrips. And me and my people at Leeanne, our CEO, who you will hear from later on, we've been doing a lot in the last year or so, last 6 to 18 months. when it comes to housing for Homelands in the Ganambar region. You know, we're talking about, we're trying to find ways on how we can get funding to, you know, fix our roads and airstrips. And this 12 months funding cycle from the NTG, which Leeanne mentioned, you know, it's not going to help us. There's not enough for, you know, organizations like Leeanne, you know, for planning and, you know, for the next steps. And there are other organizations, Homeland Service providers, who will be, you know, copying a lot, same as us at Leeanne. So, and there is a lot that we can do together when it comes to improving the lives of the Aboriginal people living on Homelands, right? There is a lot that we can do together with the people on the ground, the Northern Territory government and the federal government. Because at the moment, to be honest, talking here and saying this up front, I am getting sick and tired of all the political game being played, because Homelands is still under the too hard basket. You know, we're still under the too hard basket. Our governments, they still don't know what to do with us. I'm getting old. I've been talking like, I don't know, for many, many years. I'm not going to be here for too long. When the intervention started, there was a delegation from Yirrkala that went down to talk with the former Federal Minister, Jenny Macklin. And I said to her then, I hope come 2025 or 2030, I'm not talking about this, the same thing. This is what I said to her. Eh? And look where we're at now. This is 2026, and I'm still talking about the same things. Eh? And housing is a big problem for Homelands. But that have, you know, we at Leeanne, we haven't given up. We've last year, or 2 years, I think it was 2 years ago, we started talking about, you know, taking on other avenues, other ways, finding out ways on how we can build our own houses in the Homelands. And we are in that process now, because NTG or the federal government, they don't have the funds for new builds in the Homelands. So we at Leeanne, we've, you know, taken on a new project, and which you will hear from our CEO, Glenda, over there. She will be talking about that later, talking about a partnership. Yeah. So that's all for me, and thank you for listening.
Hello. Yeah, Joyce again. I want to say something I forgot to say. We're still struggling for the roads. Contracts still, I don't want to say it, and yeah, we just wanted to need our contractor for our area and for the roads. And yeah, truck can't even go. Yeah, sometimes, you know, water, we just, you know, and our clinic cars, yeah, still are struggling, yeah. And I'm living in, still in tin sheds, 9 grandchildren, toilets and showers still outside, and kids love to go to school every day, and yeah, it's, yeah. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what Mr Ganambar said, we often hear that, you know, there's a community rioting somewhere and, you know, houses are getting busted up and things like that. But what really the government doesn't understand is that when you put 13 different clan groups into one community that might have been feuding for hundreds of years, they're not going to stop feuding just because they're living in a community together. So this is what a lot of the problems that we have when we force people to move off their homelands. So I'd like you to thank our panel members. That was great, you mob. Thank you.